That's your non-spoiler review? That's a great question. So I say this again, where it's like, I don't want to build up your guys' crazy expectations, because this is a game that has technically been hyped up ever since the PlayStation 3, right? Ever since the early 2000s, ever since we had the concept that you could remake Final Fantasy VII, where it's like, man, just imagine the world of Final Fantasy VII remade in a way that was like high fidelity and spectacular. Impossible task to do something like that. It seems like if you want to take the world of FF7, already a really big and expansive and, you know, fairly large world, even on a PS1 scale, doing something like that on the scale of a modern graphical, on modern graphics and hardware seems ridiculously hard. And I would agree with you. In my head, I had an idea of what they could do with a big world of FF7. This game was not that. It was not that at all. It was way better. It was way more than, even as somebody that... My favorite game is FF7. I'm not a huge FF7 hardcore. I have recently seen over the past, you know, few years from FF7 Remake and OG FF7, how hardcore the fandom can get. And I would emphatically like to tell you, I'm actually not there. As much as I'm a big FF7 fan, it goes much deeper than me. So as someone that is a relatively big FF7 fan, I couldn't believe what I was playing. FF7 Remake was a great game, and the biggest aspect of it that I think made it really resonant was that, oh, can we actually realize FF7 in a way that makes, you know, has modern sensibility and actually makes sense and actually respects its characters. That was something that felt like it was kind of missing ever since the OG FF7 days, and I think Remake did a pretty good job at that, man.
Let's get down to business, shall we?
Huh?
These water filters won't replace themselves. Although the next batch probably could, if Jessie put her mind to it. Most every home in the area has one. Folks love them because they practically eliminate the rotten egg smell. Honestly, they make us more money than this place. And it's easy money, too. We bring the filters, collect the old ones, and get paid. What?
It's this dumbass side quest. He's like, oh god. Was it the greatest game ever? I personally have a really good time with it, but upon even review, when we went back and played it again, there's a lot of spots of it that I can critically spot that is like, okay, so the level design's really rough here. Some of these aerial enemies really mess with the gameplay stuff. There's aggressive pacing issues throughout certain parts of the game that just make it, you know, that just bring down the experience. Like, I think critically, I put that game maybe at, even nowadays, it's somewhere close to like an 8.5 to a 9. When I personally probably give it like a 9, right? So that comes to my personal take on this game, and I think I'm just going to throw it out right here at the start, what my personal take on this experience was, from I think just as in terms of a general video game experience, and also as an FF7 fan. I think this game's a 10 out of 10, critically. I think it's a 10 out of 10. If I was on a review site, I probably would have been like one of the many others that critically give this game a 10 out of 10. If I speak on it to a personal level, I'm not gonna be talking out of line and be like it's a 12 out of 10, because I think that sort of eliminates my eliminates my personal attachment to it, to jokes. I personally think it's also a 10 out of 10. And in terms of something that I already really love, and translating the thing that I already really love from nearly 30 years ago into modern sensibilities without absolutely thrashing it, like gameplay wise and character wise and everything, without absolutely thrashing it, I personally give it a 10 out of 10. I actually could not believe it. Most of the game, I could not believe that they were able to execute the things I was seeing. And they did it again, and they did it again, and then they would top it again, and then they would top it again, and then you get a little bit more and they top it again, and then at some point it starts to become a question: is there too much game in this game? And then it's a legit concern where it's like, okay, so there's so much to do in this, now there's almost too much. Now it's like, wait a minute, are we getting critical on the game for the game having too much high quality stuff throughout most of it? It's really crazy that this game is like that it's a 100+ hour experience. For most people, it'll be 100+ hours on first playthrough, which is insane. And it's almost like too much of a good thing a lot of the time. But in reality, a lot of that stuff, even though I personally liked it, a lot of that stuff is 100% optional. You do not have to do it. somebody had a funny take. Some review site, I forgot what it was, actually critically brought the game down a little bit because the game was there was too much game in it. Like there was too many things, almost like having to absorb this in a short period of time was a burden. And I would agree with that, man. I would actually agree. Yeah, if you are forced to play this game mad fast, I would feel literally burdened by it. Because even if you were a fan and you had to like absolutely mash through the game as quickly as possible, it would not be a good experience. However, for most humans, we don't have to do that. Even in my situation, I really didn't want to do that. I wanted to take my effing time. And just for perspective, what did I do in my first playthrough? Literally everything, I think. Almost like 99.9% in the world map, all of its quests, all of its engagements, all of its enemies. I don't think I asked everything, and I didn't do some of the hard mode mini games in some of the quests. Why did I not do some of the hard mode mini games, even though they do offer party experience, which gives you really good stuff for your party on the folios? Why didn't I do that? Because I didn't like them. There was a few of them that were frustratingly challenging. What in the hell? And were aggressively challenging towards the end when it got harder. So thinking of jumping into a hard mode of that and just wanting to experience it again, even though I didn't intend to completionist this game, but I did feel like, well, we're already almost there, so we might as well do it. Dude, there were just some of them that like, yeah, I just don't think this mini game is as good as the others. This game is crammed full of variety content. Just more than I would argue this game has more quote unquote variety content than any video game I've ever seen, dude. Like this sort of puts action games like Bayonetta, which already have a lot of variety in it. They have these cool extra scenes where you're flying around or you're on a surfboard or you're doing all this crazy stuff. It does that. Games like Yakuza also do that. They offer a ridiculous amount outside of just core gameplay, which is, you know, getting into fights with people type of thing. It sort of takes that and times it by like an exponential amount, where just so much of it is like every time you run into a new quest in this game, the game has to teach you a mechanic. The game has to teach you how to do this. The game has to teach you how to do that. Sometimes it does go a little too far, I will say. Sometimes in some spots, when that involves Kate Sith is all I'll say, because I don't want to get too spoilery. Yes, it's like we did not need this to be this way, and there's no reason why this needed to be this way. It would have been much better if it wasn't this way. And to be real, the majority of the other ones, you almost forget how many times you experience variety content in this game outside of the core gameplay loop, which is like engagements, world, dungeons, bosses, repeat, you know? And they just do so much of it, man. To the point where I really appreciate what they did with dungeons in this game. I don't think they went as far as something that was a Guardians of the Galaxy, for anybody that played that. Guardians of the Galaxy had a really cool thing they did with team, where when you solved puzzles with the team and each character had like a thing they do. One pushes heavy stuff, one like grapples up here, and you have to like combine those elements to get to and solve dungeons. However, they don't go that far in this game, but they give each character a dungeon, right? They give each character a gimmick and a dungeon that you can pilot them through and have access to their unique gimmick in that area. And I really liked it. What it did was make not every dungeon feel like an aggressive hallway. Just an aggressive hallway with boxes, chests, very pretty scenery, and also combat. It was able to split that up in a way that made it feel relatively good, to the point where, oh, the Mithril mines were dope. Oh, the Corel mines were also super dope. Like, getting into these areas actually I was looking forward to it, instead of at some points in Remake dreading it. There are a couple spots in FF7 Remake where it's just like, if it wasn't for the music and the characters and the combat, this would suck. This dealing with these hands on the collapsed expressway, revisiting the sewers, having to go through the drum or something like that. There are spots in Remake that I have 100% been critical of. And it was some really, really lackluster level design stuff. And I think they did a good job at fixing that. Again, I think Remake to Rebirth, most stuff in Rebirth is an answer to the problems in Remake, which I really appreciate. I think this game is a true sequel. In the era of the games we have right now, I've started to notice this, and it was with Doom 2016. and I've mentioned this a few times, with Doom 2016 to Doom Eternal, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 2, and games like God of War 2018 to God of War Ragnarok, the sequel games are, by large an amount, mostly better than the originals. The comparable difference is that the sequels to games now take a lot of elements from the previous game, but clearly expand it. So when you look at them from a critical lens, it's like, oh man, yeah, the next game is just the previous game, but there's just more stuff. However, there's a lacking impact. There's like an impact from, and the same thing happens in this game to a degree. There's an impact from the first release where it's like, oh man, yeah, this is like a new way of doing this. This is a brand new way of playing Doom. This is a brand new way of experiencing Zelda. Zelda Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom is another good idea. This is a brand new way of experiencing God of War. So I think that first fresh sort of like, oh man, this is the best Spider-Man has ever been. My God, that feeling is relatively diminished in sequels now, because the newness is effectively gone, and you're like just ready for the next one. I'll even echo that when it came to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. That in FF7 Rebirth, I'd overall say my excitement was at a high. But we've been excited for like a few years, right? Looking forward to this game, and we have a pretty good idea what the game's already gonna be, which is already a thing that's set up in our heads. But with FF7 Remake, dog, it was like 15 plus years. It was like, ever since FF7 came out, we've been wishing that this could be a thing, right? We've been wishing this could be a thing. So that's a challenge, right? That's a challenge now with follow-up games. Are you able to change enough to make this feel fresh in a way that this feels like, you know, this game will shock you in ways that even the first part did? And here's where I have to give Rebirth mad credit. Of all these games I just mentioned, I think the follow-up games are great. I think they're really good. But the follow-up games lacked that impact. It lacked like a, oh man, like this is so cool. It's so different like than the previous game. It really didn't. It felt like we were retreading sort of similar water with obviously expanded mechanics, better controls, better graphics, like all that kind of stuff. It felt that. It felt this is a bit more of the same. Okay. So the impact is a little lost. However, in Rebirth, I was aware of that leading up to this, so I felt like my internal excitement might not have been as high as something like Remake. But I have to give this game credit. It surprised me over and over and over again in ways that sequels to other games are just like, yeah, this is cool because, you know, obviously I love this in Doom 2016 and now we get to do this here. This game did it in ways that I was like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that.
And action! Some know me as the world's greatest materia hunter.
She's back.
Others, an unstoppable assassin. And the rest, a benevolent and beautiful ninja. But who am I truly? Who ties what rose? The one and only Yuffie!
And then she's gonna fall off something.
Cool. Hey, hold it, you spiky jerk face. Where do you think you're going?
Whoa. I wasn't expecting you to go here with this. Whoa, I wasn't. Really? Were you? Wait a minute, you're doing that? That happened all the way until the second to last chapter of the game. And there's a big thing that happens, obviously endgame, that once again expands everything that blows my mind. And I'm just like, I don't believe it. What? And here's something I do have to give this game a little bit of credit. I was once again running into a completionist thing, doing most of the stuff in the game just because I enjoyed it. As I played through it, people are like, are you 100%ing this? And I'm like, dude, I have no intention of 100%ing this game. I don't. I have no intention of doing that. But the stuff I'm running into is all interesting, and the rewards I'm getting for them are good. We did it! I didn't even mean to do it. And that's the crazy part. I didn't even mean to do this shit. I didn't even mean to do this. We just kept doing stuff. I want to know the story, bro. Like, I want to know. It's just like I'm having a great time just doing shit. I think the game did a pretty good job at incentivizing side questing and the other alternative actions of the game outside of just main story. The game did a very good job at that because most people that play through this game are like, man, there's so many side quests and stuff. There's almost like too much. Like, it honestly becomes a burden to them because it's like, but I want the rewards. I want all the cool stuff you can get from that. It's like, okay, yeah, you know, I'm with you there. But to me, it was like, there was a few times in this game where it's like, okay, I'm kind of done with this. And that I could specifically account a few of them. It was a couple of mini games, a couple of very notorious mini games. I'm like, I'm kind of done with this. I can put this to the side. Let's just continue the story. I could keep doing this for hours, man. I could stay here for hours, but I'm personally a little done with it. Let's move the story forward. And there were other parts where I was in an environment and doing stuff where it's like, you know what? There's a lot more stuff to do here. I'm going to come back later. And I just did that. So I was doing my best to not get burned out because there is so much content. And I feel like because the game has so much content and that content is high quality, it can almost be fatiguing. It feels like there's so much space in between the big story elements. There's clearly one, I think the final area you run into, the final big biome that the game offers you. Right at that point in the game, I was feeling open world fatigue. I was starting to feel it where it's like, yeah, you know what? At this point, I'm kind of like wanting to do story stuff. But the nice part is that every time I felt that in this game, where it's like, I feel like I'm getting fatigue of this, it's almost like the game knew, and the game would throw something new at me. Something new and like off the cuff, and I wasn't expecting it. And that almost felt intentional, where it's like, whoa, okay. And then it sort of like reinvigorated my spirit again to be like, damn, now I'm super down. Now I actually want to go back to the other things that I went before. So can I give an example of that? My example of that is the final area you run into, the final zone and what happens after it. The final zone, I was pretty much done with the open worldness of the game, a little done with it. And then they give you a new way of traversal, a chicken traversal that feels really nice. And they also do something to the world after that, no spoilers, that definitely blew my mind. I couldn't believe we're doing this shit. I think I'm really impressed that the game managed to do that. That the game managed to be like fresh to me after effectively was 130 hours. It was an insanely huge game. I can't even really boil down all of the individual peak elements for me because I love the characters. I love the set pieces. I have some criticisms, which I'm going to highlight right now, that I don't think deserve to bring the game down an entire rating. And the clear criticisms are lighting, right? It's funny that Final Fantasy VII Remake was the example of how this series of games is going to handle lighting. And FF7 Remake was a game where it's gorgeous. Oh my God, this game is beautiful. I can't believe it. And then it turns to daytime and everything's trashy, right? Everything's so trashy. So that's a challenge for Rebirth. The FF7 Remake doesn't do daytime very well. Most of the areas in the day sort of lose a lot of their charm. They fixed that for the most part, I would say. I think a lot of the towns in the day are actually pretty charming. Cosmo Canyon, Nibelheim, Calm. A lot of these places are great in the daytime. But some of the open world areas, I think they look a lot better with lower light, And I think you get access to some spots in like nighttime or sunset, things that aren't just like a gleaming sunlight noon, And I kind of needed the world to not just like to look a little bit different at times, which was sort of like refreshing when that happened. And that does happen where you get like the daytime and the sunset sort of parts of games. So anyway, I think some areas in the daytime lose a little bit of their charm, and it would have been great to see some more stuff at night. Is that a massive criticism? Not really. It just made me realize that, oh yeah, a lot of the nighttime stuff in part 1 looked really good, and a lot of the nighttime stuff in this game also looks really good. Another criticism I got is of the overall world itself, and it's something I echo over and over again. This is so that I'm not a complete shill. I really like FF7 Remake and Rebirth, obviously, and I think Rebirth is going down as one of my... I can't really recall a game experience like this. Like, the last time was essentially Elden Ring. When I was playing Elden Ring, I'm playing one of the greatest games ever made. There's clearly some spots that I don't love in Elden Ring. Clearly some spots throughout this game that I'm not absolutely in love with, but I can identify that I am currently playing one of the greatest games ever made. That was the last time I got this feeling. I didn't even get that feeling with Bloodborne, man. I didn't get that feeling. I felt that with Rebirth, though. I think the big moment that it happened was like Junon. And as you're going through Junon, I'm like, yep, this is going to go down as like one of the best games ever made. It really is. And the fact that the game got better and better and better after that was really, really something special to me. My dudes.
All troopers present and accounted for, sir. Ready to go, sir.
So anyway, critically though, there are things that we can fix for part 3. And I do want to make a separate like video / collection of my thoughts and ways that they can make part 3 better. Because clearly we might be in a Zelda Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom situation for part 3, where we're going to expand the world, right? But it's going to be a very familiar one. We're going to go back to places like Midgar, clearly. We're going to revisit the places that have existed in this game, but it might not be like the true super fresh feeling that this game gives you. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The big one was traversal. If there's something I ended up being kind of critical about over time, it's traversal. I think this game needs a jump button. I would love it if the next game in FF7 Reclaim comes out, or whatever the heck they call it. We need to be able to scale like the mountains, much less the rocks and the general geometry of the world, a bit smoother. It just needs to be smoother. That's it. And it's not like it's not like it's bad. I genuinely don't think it's bad. It's just that at the start, you just got to get used to it. You have to like sort of like twist your head and you accept that's the way it is. And then the rest of the game is you're kind of fine, right? I kind of feel that like it feels a little outdated. It feels like it was a compromise that they had to make for how big this world is, and they didn't have time to come up with a solution. So ultimately, what I'm talking about is the weird scaling of objects and contextual jumping. Climbing ladders is one thing, and yellow paint stuff, I don't care about that. I'm fine with it. But when it came down to like, if you want to take your chocobo, right, and just gun it, full speed chocobo down a mountain in the grasslands in Rebirth, what happens? You don't smoothly run down. You're like, you're like, you do not you do not smoothly like fly down that area. Your character gets locked on all of this essential open world like cliff jank as you're flying along, and that just didn't feel good sometimes. So I don't think it brings down the game where it's like, this really ruined it for me, and it doesn't. But it's something that you just sort of get used to, and it's clearly something I think can be fixed in the next game. There's another thing that leads into, as I finish up this personal review on the game that is not spoilery, that starts to get into spoilers but isn't, is storytelling. And FF7 Rebirth tackles its overall approach to story the same way that Remake does, where about 95% of this game is pretty much classic FF7 1-to-1. Almost like all of this game is a lovely preservance of OG FF7 and a massive expansion therein of like all of the elements just way better and bigger and expanded, and very few parts that I feel like, oh, I like this more in the original a little bit. There was a couple of points where I felt that way, but like, dude, almost every single area and location I went to, I felt like I was back in the 90s, dude. It was insane. I don't want to talk about the two parts about that I specifically felt like were better in the OG specifically, because they can be kind of spoilery. But this game, as well as Remake, have a big issue in terms of its, I'd say, larger overscaling plot feeding to the audience. And I don't think it's scaled well. The same thing happens in Remake, where you get and this is a Remake thing. In Remake, you get a lot of information very fast in the finality of the game. It comes almost so quick that you don't even feel like you've processed what just happened, and you're already getting something new that is hitting you in the head, and you're like, oh god, so wait a minute. So a lot of the ending of that game comes across as like weird and Kingdom Heartsy by many accounts, because it doesn't take time to like give you a little bit of space to absorb what's happening, right? You need to give me a little bit of space to like acknowledge what this is and what's going on, and it goes a bit fast. There is some parts at the beginning of this game that are really good, that are paced great. I love the opening 2.5 hours, dude. I friggin' love it.
I just spied the cutest chick. light pink dress, ribbon in her hair. I think I'm in love, man. Can't let this one get away.
Seriously, bro? Well, I spotted a girl with the best physique I've ever seen.
Wow, I can't believe I missed her. As a founding member of the Singles Club, I should have been paying more attention.
You do know we're the only ones in that club, right?
How much charm can this game have? Can you chill? But I have to be critical. We all know that, like, Zach is in the game. That's not a spoiler. He's in the first 5 minutes. My dude, my criticism is that we don't get any updates on that part of the game for 30 hours. Interesting developments. Oh my god. Oh my god. It's been so long, bruh. We're 30 hours into the game, and the title of the screen is saying, like, FF7 Rebirth, and we see Zack and Cloud walking into Midgar. Cool. Wow, this is going to be about something. This is going to be related to Cloud and Zack's relationships. They exist somewhere, some way. Oh my god. The way we are given that information takes way too long. I don't. Again, this is almost a criticism of the original game. Because the original game, the time space that we are taking FF7 here, the middle part of FF7, right after Midgar, the problem with that game is the same issue with this game. Where pretty much it's an adventure from point A to point B, point A to point B, or I'm sorry, point B to point C, you know, C to D, all that kind of stuff. You kind of go from one spot to another, and each spot in between, you visit a character's backstory, right? You essentially get a big fill-in on what those characters do, and you get more idea of their relationships with each other. So we're spending a lot of time effectively globetrotting and getting to know our characters, which is completely fine, dude. This game does the exact same thing. But like the original, we really don't get the crux of, like, the plot, the really big plot elements until you get to Nibelheim, which we do get some good stuff in this game, but that shit is like 80 hours in on my playthrough. And we really don't get a big finality to, like, the story structure of how this stuff is going until the very end of the game after that. And even that doesn't have, you know, exactly what you might be expecting. So really, it's also an issue in the old game, where it's like, where does the true plot of FF7 really kick in the old game? Well, it's kind of past City of the Ancients, past the Sleeping Forest, past all of that stuff, past Icicle Inn. It's past all of that area. It's when you get to the Northern Crater. When the Northern Crater is like, oh, now we're getting into the story, bro. Now we're, like, really getting into where the story is going. And the problem with this game is we are not getting the Northern Crater thing. We're not. All of those big plot points where, like, FF7 story really kicks in, because most people agree Disc 2 of Final Fantasy VII is absolutely incredible. Disc 3 is just like cutscenes for the most part. But really, if we want to be critical about FF7 and how its distribution of events are split back in the day, yeah, no, Disc 2 is wild. It's so much fun. You get so much stuff you can do. You get so many new things thrown at you every single place. You get these crazy locations. You have to go back to places. Things are different. New things are happening. It is wild. And even Disc 1 is great. Disc 1 of FF7, which effectively was remake and what we just played in Rebirth. That's just Disc 1, man. Disc 2 is where everything, like, whoa, this shit's kicking in, bro. Like, things are happening now. And this game doesn't have all of the Disc 2 elements, or any of the Disc 2 elements. And I feel like that just might be one of my biggest criticisms of the game, is that the way they distributed a lot of the story in this is all put in the end, and we just don't get enough time to, like, absorb. We just needed a bit more time to be like, oh, so that's what that is, and sit on it a bit. And then they show you something new in the end, right? Or something new as the game progresses a little bit forward. So anyway, is this confirmed to be a trilogy? Yes. There's only 3 parts. The third part is going to be insane. And I have to give them credit. Things change in this game. Things are expanded in this game in ways that I was not expecting, and I was very surprised by. But I personally feel they were all done to the effect of enhancing part 3. They all set up for a part 3 that seems like it has way bigger stakes than the OG game. The OG game is about delivering the black materia to Sephiroth at the top of the planet, and then a big rock shows up, and we're all gonna die, and then, you know, kaijus start showing up right after that. It's really cool. I think the next game is gonna do the exact same thing. Again, I think the promise from the developers is that, yeah, 90 to 95% of our games is gonna be like the OG. It's gonna be like the old one, right? I think the next one's gonna do the same thing. But I think the alterations and expansion therein is going to make the next game insane. And here's the crazy part. Here's my crazy prediction of it. I don't know if it's going to be as good as Rebirth. and that's like my final part of the review. I think Rebirth is so good. I think it's so good. And the fact that this game was so good, I really do not see a path where you're able to one-up this. I don't. And I think Edge Magazine shockingly also gave this game a 9 out of 10, an insanely high review from one of the most critical gaming journalistic magazines out there. They gave FF7 Rebirth a 9. That does not happen from those guys. It does not. So that's incredibly high, but they had the same sort of criticism where they feel like it's going to be almost impossible for them to outdo this in the next game. So I think it leads to a lot of expectations from fans. I think it leads to a lot of hope from people like me that the next game is going to be insane. But at the same point, even if part 3 is an expansion of part 2, and we have the same world, even more stuff to do, they expand it in several ways, maybe the ocean is involved, obviously air travel is going to be involved, all of that kind of stuff, I feel like the newness and impact and shock that the devs cared this much as we played through this game, the fact that that happened over and over and over again, I legit feel like they did too good of a job. I personally feel I'm going to be super happy with the next game. And it's going to be way better than Remake. And it's going to be probably just as good as this. But this experience was something else for me, dude. FF7 Rebirth and playing through this game was like, I have to say it again, it was like a dream. And I've dreamed of playing an FF7 remake throughout my life at random times, right? I've had dreams of that. This game was way better.